Welcome to the online worship service of Triumph Lutheran Brethren Church. Triumph is a multi-site church in the Midwest with campuses in Moorhead, Minnesota and West Fargo, North Dakota. Our vision is to see the life and message of Jesus transform hearts, homes, and cities. We're grateful that you've joined us online as the Lord works through our ministry both locally and around the world. Wherever you are at, our prayer is that God would meet you and that the life and message of Jesus would transform your life.
Okay, so before we get started, I have to call out the elephant, or maybe better yet, the submarine in the room. We are so excited for Vacation Bible School, aren't we? Man, we just love this season and this time of the summer as we begin the summer with our Vacation Bible School. Hundreds of kids will be in this space in the next days ahead of us. And as usual, some of the guys and some of the men of our congregation have really taken on the task of set design. And so as you can see in the theme of scuba, going underwater, we have our incredible submarine back here and some jellyfish that are ready to float in the sky. And so we're putting the final wraps on that. And I got to be honest with you, of all the things that were on my list that I wanted to accomplish before I died, preaching in front of a submarine was not on the list, but it is now because I can check it off. So we are really excited about Vacation Bible School, and so that's what you see behind me. But it's going to be a wonderful week. Can't wait to tell you about it after it is completed. We have a chance to talk about all the wonderful things that God did over the course of the VBS week. But we're going to continue our series today in the way of wisdom, looking at the book of Proverbs. I don't know how many of you guys have ever uttered the prayer, "Oh God, give me wisdom. Just give me wisdom." Usually that give me wisdom is in a specific moment. Maybe it's a tense moment. You're working with your teenager and you don't know what to do, or you're at a family Christmas and things are getting heated and oh, what am I supposed to do? How do I handle this situation? Or maybe the God give me wisdom is because you have a big decision, life-altering decision to make. That life-altering decision can be affecting your employment, affecting your family, affecting relationships. It's these moments in which we need wisdom. Some would even say in the church circles, they would say, I need the wisdom of Solomon to figure this one out. Well, where does that phrase come from? Why is the wisdom of Solomon talked about? Well, it comes from 1 Kings chapter 3. See, in 1 Kings chapter 3, a young man, 20-year-old, named Solomon becomes king. Now, his dad, King David, the great King David, rose Israel to being a regional powerhouse. They were a power to be reckoned with in the region. They had expanded their territory. Things were going really, really well, and this was handed to Solomon. And one night, God asked him, what do you want? As the king, as I show favor to you, what is it that you ask for? And Solomon describes himself as just a little child. I have no idea what I'm doing, God. You've got to give me the wisdom to figure out how to do this. And so he asks for wisdom, and God gives it to him. He's recorded in the scriptures as having over 3,000 proverbs. These little pithy short statements, easy to remember statements of wisdom and knowledge, 3,000 of them. By the way, in the book of Proverbs, we have about 800 to 900, depending on how you want to count them out. So we don't even have a third of the wisdom of Solomon. And he's been called the wisest man that ever lived. It takes the wisdom of Solomon to figure this one out. God, give me wisdom. Wisdom is a part of our everyday life. It's needed for our everyday life. There are so many things that are coming at us, decisions that need to be made about our life and about our family. How do we navigate a world that's telling us one thing, but we believe God is telling us another? It takes wisdom. So as we begin, today we're looking at the fountain of wisdom, or where does wisdom come from? How do we get wisdom? How do we get wise? Well, before we do that, there may be a couple questions that we have to answer, maybe as a review from last week, but also kind of setting the stage for today. And the first one is simply this: what is wisdom? Well, I've been working on a definition of my own. I don't think it's very good, but it's going to be the one that we're going to use. And it's simply this: wisdom is the insight to see the world as God has created it, and the foresight to know how to live according to how he has created it. It's the insight to see the world as God has created it, and it's the foresight to live in it according to how he has created it. So it has a couple assumptions in it. The first one is that God has created this world. We believe that to be true. And if God has created this world, he hasn't just created it haphazardly. There's an order, there's a rhythm, there's a way things work in this world. And there's a way in which things work good, and there are ways in which things work poorly or struggle. And so when we ask for wisdom, we're asking for insight to see the world as God has created it. But it's also a foresight to look ahead, to say, if we make a decision, if we make decision A or we make decision B, what's going to happen? How can I carry that decision out and look beyond now to see how will this go? Will this work? Will this not work? Will option B work or will it not work? So wisdom assumes that God has created the world and that there is an order to the world. And then there's a way in which to live in the world based on that order. So wisdom sees this today and knows what it can look like in the future as we live out decisions. See, to go against wisdom, to choose folly, as Proverbs describes it, it's not only disobeying God, because God has a way in which things should be done. It's just dumb, right? Because to choose folly, to choose foolishness, rubs against the created order. It doesn't go in line or in harmony with all that God has created. It rubs and it butts against it. So now we're grading against reality. We're trying to go against the stream of how the world is functioning as God has created it. So wisdom is the insight to see the world as God has created it, and the foresight to see how to live according to it. That's what wisdom is. All right, so where does wisdom come from? Well, it comes from the one who created the world. One of the things that we learn in Proverbs chapter 8 and in Job is that wisdom, it is in wisdom God created everything. See, we think being wise is a human attribute. You are a wise person, or you are an unwise person. But wisdom is not a human attribute. It's a divine attribute because it predates humanity. Wisdom existed long before humans do. So any wisdom that humans carry is given by God, because wisdom is God's and God's alone. He holds wisdom. He holds all the wisdom. And so when we ask him for wisdom, as James chapter 1 talks about. If you lack wisdom, ask and he will give it to you, because he has it. If it's his, it is his to give and his alone. And there's a difference between human wisdom and earthly wisdom. Right? Human wisdom doesn't add up the same way as godly wisdom. It's interesting because as Solomon is doing his writing in Proverbs, as we see it in the other Proverbs that he had written down that we don't have, he's not the only ruler to put out his wisdom in writing form. Right? You'd see this in Syria, you're going to see this in ancient Egypt, you're going to see this in Mesopotamia, you're going to see this in that time frame. But what makes Solomon's wisdom unique from the wisdom of other worldly leaders at the time is that other worldly leaders were focused on behavior modification. This is what you need to do. Do this, act this way, say this. Whereas the wisdom that Solomon is putting forth has to do with the heart. It's way more of an inward thing. It's a character wisdom, not just an acts wisdom. It's not how you act. It's the character inside. So we're going to see over and over again in Proverbs seeking the Lord, finding the Lord, fearing the Lord, going back into a character thing. It's an inward thing. So as Solomon describes his wisdom, he says it starts on the inside and goes to the outside, whereas other leaders are focused on the outside, behavior. As we go through Proverbs this summer, we're not looking at behavior modification. We're looking at the inward change. And we see this in the New Testament. This isn't just a Proverbs thing. It's a whole Bible thing. That as our heart is changed, our actions change. God isn't concerned about changing our actions. He's concerned about changing our hearts. The effects of a heart change are the actions. But he's not concerned about changing the heart. That's not his primary concern about you and for me. It's to change our behavior, but rather to change ourselves and our heart. See, wisdom comes from God. Because God created the world. And so our wisdom is to see the world as God has created it, and the foresight to look ahead to see how to live in it. That's wisdom. It comes from God, and it's his and his alone to give. So it leads us to the question that is our topic for today. How do you get wisdom? How do you get wise? How do you live a wise life? I want you to imagine that you're 5 years old. You're at preschool. And as you're at preschool, you're standing out in the playground and you have two friends. Now, one friend is telling you that you should pick up a handful of the pea rock that is lining the floor of the playground. And you should take that pea rock and you should go throw it at another kid. So do it, you should do it. Do it. And then the other friend of yours is telling you, don't do it. Don't do it. Teacher says, don't throw rocks. Don't throw rocks. Don't do it. Don't pick them up. Don't throw it. And you've got two voices coming at you. One saying, pick it up and throw it. And the other one saying, don't do it. A 5-year-old on the preschool playground is actually not that unlike you and me today. Because we have voices speaking to us all the time. There are so many voices that are attempting to talk to us. And who you listen to, it matters. It matters what voice you listen to. Solomon would write this in Proverbs 13. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. It's a verse that I've used with high school and junior high kids for years. It's a peer pressure verse, really. Saying those who you surround yourself with, you're going to become like that person. Right? If you walk with wise people, you're going to become wise. If you hang out with fools, you're going to become a fool. Because who you listen to matters. We have so many voices, so many people talking to us. We have parents, we have teachers, coaches, coworkers, friends. We have TV commercials, internet commercials. We got pastors, right? We got Sunday school teachers. So many voices coming at us. And they have a message behind that voice. The message is either a godly message or an ungodly message. The question of life and the question of a wise life is, what voices are we going to listen to, and what messages are you going to listen to, and what messages are you going to trust, and what messages are you going to respect? One of the themes that we're going to see over and over again in the book of Proverbs is the idea of listening to voices. If you're reading through Proverbs and you're doing our reading plan with us, and you're going to find over and over again that wisdom calls to us, but then the world is going to call to us, and we have to listen. So here's a dividing line for us. The difference between a wise life and a foolish life is the voice that you listen to. The difference between a wise life and a foolish life is the voice that you listen to. So with all of that introduction and all of that setup, I want to read our text for today. We're going to be in Proverbs chapter 2. verses 1 through 8, as Solomon lays out the call or the need for wisdom and how it is that we go and get it. So if you have your Bibles, Proverbs chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you search for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come understanding, knowledge and understanding. He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones. How do you get wisdom? How do you get it? It begins actually in chapter 1. The text that was read last week, Proverbs 1:7 says this, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now, that Hebrew word for beginning can be translated maybe a couple different ways, or it has maybe a fuller nuance to it. It isn't just the beginning, the starting spot, although it is certainly the starting and the positional being the first thing. So the fearing the Lord is the first thing in understanding and having wisdom. But it's also can be translated as the central part, the most important part. So it's a beginning, but it's also the most important part. The fear of the Lord is the most important part of beginning and getting wisdom and knowledge. It's the fear of the Lord. How do we understand the fear of the Lord? I don't know how you've grown up, if you've grown up in the church and you've heard this, or maybe you've never heard this idea before, and the fear of the Lord has a different connotation to it. And I think it's helpful for us to understand there's a negative fear and there's a positive fear. Right? The negative fear is concerned about one's self and the protection of oneself. For example, you're walking down a dark alley one night all by yourself, and 5 men come walking at you with pipes and chains, and they're very large men. There is a fear that should come over you. That's a negative fear, right? And by the way, that's a very good fear. You should act according to how the fear is telling you to act, right? Like, get out of that situation. There's also a fear of being startled, and that comes with being startled and being frightened because something happened quickly. Like, for example, when angels showed up, we see this in the Bible. A fear or a terror strikes them as an angel shows up. My 10-year-old son has gotten into this incredible game that he loves to play in which he tries to startle his mother. And he got her really good the other day. She screamed, she jumped, the whole thing. It was fantastic, right? It was wonderful. But there's a negative-based fear. That fear is concerned about oneself, and that fear is a protectionary over oneself because of how the other person is going to respond or what's happening outside of them. There is a negative fear. And it's interesting because many people live in this kind of fear of the Lord. They have this kind of fear. They are afraid of God. They are afraid of punishment. They are afraid of getting struck by lightning by God. They are afraid of judgment in front of God. And so not only do they live this way, but they also behave in this manner. The idea of following God's law is in order to have God not hurt them. But they want to do enough good things, or they want to behave in such a way that God will love them and not be judgeful of them. And so they live in this negative fear of God, being afraid of him. But there's also a positive fear. So that's the negative fear. There's a positive fear, and it's got to do more with like a reverence or an awe or a wonder. Right? It's kind of like when you step into the presence of someone great. There's someone that you admire, that you respect, that they have earned your respect, whether that be a musician or whether that be an actor or whether that be a business person or an author or a speaker. You're in their presence and you have that moment of like, oh, I can't believe I'm here. Right? Like, I can't believe I'm in their presence. I can't believe I'm with them right now. And when you have that kind of fear, it's a positive, it is a wonderful thing because they've earned respect and admiration. There's a positive fear and there's a negative fear. The positive fear of the Lord is when we treat God as God. I think one of the things that we lose in our Western Christianity is we focus so heavily on the love of God, as we should. And we focus so heavily on God as our dad, as our loving father, as we should. That we often lose the fact that he is God, that he is the creator of everything, that he is the sustainer of it all, that he is the redeemer of all who are lost. And we see him as buddy-buddy, loving dad, which he is, but we lose the king of the universe that holds all the power, the one who merely spoke creation into existence. We've lost the awe and the reverence and the wonder. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. How can you have that positive fear of the Lord? There's only one way to have that positive fear of the Lord. Not the afraid part of the Lord, but the positive fear of the Lord. The way you have positive fear of the Lord is to not be afraid of God. If you have nothing to fear as you stand in front of him, you have a positive fear of the Lord. If you have no reason to be afraid of judgment, if you have no reason to be afraid that he's going to throw you out, that he's going to strike you with lightning, that he's going to kill you with a single word or a single swipe, if you have no fear of that, then you can have fear of the Lord. And how do you have no fear of judgment? How is it that you can be not afraid? Jesus. Right? Like Jesus is the beginning of wisdom. Because without Jesus, we can't have the proper fear of the Lord. Listen to this from 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. There is no fear in love, because love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. When Jesus came, when God's love was represented for us in the person of Jesus, when we see the life of Jesus and we see all that Jesus did for us, we are no longer afraid of God because that perfect love demonstrated for us on the cross of Jesus Christ drives out any afraidness that we would have of God. We can stand in a right relationship with God, free from being afraid, but sitting in the awe and wonder fear of the Lord. It has to start there. You will gain no wisdom outside of the wisdom that God gives, and you will not gain the wisdom that God gives unless you are in a right relationship with him. Jesus is the beginning of wisdom. Without him, you will never grow wise. The second thing we need to realize that we see in our text is that it starts with the fear of the Lord, but it continues with this desire for him. Verses 1 and 2 say things like, if you accept my words and store up my commands and turning your ear and applying your heart, there's a desire here. What Solomon is saying is like, if you have the proper fear of the Lord, then you desire him more. You desire to be with him more. You desire to hear him more. You desire to spend time with him. And that desire is what drives the wisdom. It's a deliberate choice to embrace and to accept God's words as we read them in the Bible, as you hear them proclaimed. There's a deliberate choice to say, this is important. There's a valuing that happens with this. It's not just simply hearing it, but yet I value it. I treasure it. In all the voices that I can hear, his voice matters more. It's his voice that matters more. There's a desire, a seeking after, and the second one is the seeking. So I have the desire for it. First, I start with the proper fear of the Lord, then a desire to be with him, and now I seek after it. See, there's a willingness to learn that shows up in verses 1 and 2 that needs to be matched with a willingness to work in verses 3 and 4. There's a seeking. Listen to these words from 3 and 4. Call out, cry aloud, look for it, search for it. It's a crying out for something that you desire to have. Right? Like maybe one way to think about this is when you're at your favorite sporting event, right? And you're cheering and screaming for your team to have defense. Let's go defense! Stop the ball, defense, let's go defense. You're calling out, encouraging them, desiring them. You want to see defense. You want to have it. You'll scream for it. The crying out and the calling aloud, it might also be because we get so much noise, so many voices that sometimes it takes our voice over the top to say, be quiet. I can't hear God. Be quiet, voices. Because that is what I desire more than anything, is to hear his voice every day of my life. To cry out, to call aloud. Then to search and to look for it. Again, because of the noise and because of every other voice that's coming, we have to decipher our way through. We have to pick our way through and throw away the voices that are telling us something other than God's message and find it. You can imagine searching through your house. Where did I leave my keys? I cannot find my keys and I have to go. I'm late. Let's go. And you're searching your house. You're tearing your house apart to find the keys. You got a gift. I don't know, this has happened to me a couple times. I don't know if it's happened to you, but I get a gift and inside is a generous sum of money from a parent or from a loved one and you can't find the card. And that sum of money makes a difference right now, right? We're going to go out to eat and we're going to use that. Where is that at? And you tear the house apart. You search for it and you look for it because it's important. And I want to have it. You desire it. You cry aloud for it and seek it. How do you find wisdom? You seek the face of the Lord. Over and over and over again. You seek the face of God. How do you get wisdom? How do you get wisdom? It begins with Jesus. I entitled this message, The Fountain of Wisdom. There's a reason for that. The fountain of wisdom. A fountain is a place you keep coming back to. A fountain is a place you can keep coming. It's like a well spring, like just opens up and continues to flow and you keep coming back to it and you keep coming back to it and you keep coming back to it. Somewhere along the line, we have bought into the lie that wisdom is something that can be gained in a moment. Right? Like I have a decision to make, so God give me wisdom in this decision. I was foolish before this decision, but now I'm wise for this decision. God, I need it in this moment, so provide it in this particular moment. It's not how wisdom works. One of the more famous Proverbs is going to come from us from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It says that if we walk with him, he'll make our paths straight. Trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your paths straight. It's interesting that he talks about paths because a path is something you walk on. Step after step after step. And as you move step after step after step, you gain wisdom. But it all starts with Jesus. Because Jesus is the place that you keep going back to. Because with him, you can have the fear of the Lord. And with the fear of the Lord, you can come to seek the face of God. And as you seek him, you'll receive the insight and the foresight you need, and you're going to live wise. But we keep going back to Jesus. We keep going back to him. You want to be wise? Walk with Jesus every day. You want to understand how this world works today, and you want to know how it's going to function if you make a decision for A or for B decision, whatever it is. You want to walk in wisdom. You walk with Jesus, day after day after day. We entitled our series, "The Way of Wisdom." It's not the secret of wisdom. It's not the instant moment that you unlock the keys to the Bible and all of a sudden everything makes sense and you have this wisdom of Solomon in a moment. But there's a unique thing that happens, that as you seek God, you find wisdom. And if you want to seek true wisdom, you find God. The fountain of wisdom, the place that you keep coming back to over and over and over again, day after day after day, is Jesus. It's in Jesus that we find and gain true wisdom. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, I'm so grateful that you've given us Jesus, because he is the beginning of wisdom. God, I would never know you. I would be terrified of you if not for Jesus. God, help me to walk daily. Help me to walk daily in Jesus, seeking you, treasuring your voice and your words above all other voices and messages that I hear. That not only may I grow closer to you, but that I would grow in my wisdom to live in the world in which you have created. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey, I'm Pastor Doug, and I want to take a minute and say thank you for watching the worship service today. If you'd like to extend your time of worship, we have a couple links to worship songs that fit today's message in the description down below. You simply click, and you can spend more time with Jesus in your day today. I have 3 quick thoughts that I wanted to share with you, and it'll only take a minute. First, we'd love to connect with you. If you'd be willing, you can visit our website at triumphlbc.org/connect and let us know how we can reach you. Or you can visit triumphlbc.org/events to find an activity that you could jump into. Second, we hope that you see this content as a supplement to your walk with Jesus. Our digital content really isn't designed to replace belonging and engaging with a gospel community. So whether that's here at Triumph or at another church, we invite you to find a community that you can connect with. And third, we invest a lot of resources into producing content that's used to bless people just like you all over our community. If this or any of the other resources we have here at Triumph have blessed you, would you consider giving? It's because of your generosity that we are able to continue creating and serving online.